I'm Professor Kenneth Hansen of the University of Central Florida Judaic Studies program, and I'd like to share, with a little help from AI, some valuable insights about history's most horrific genocide, the Shoah, otherwise known as the Holocaust. In this case, we focus on the systematic Nazi persecution of the Jews, from the rise of Hitler to the outbreak of World War II. Let's imagine a character, a German Jew, well-educated and deeply attached to his life in Berlin, where he had grown up. Let's call him Samuel, a survivor of Hitler's death camps. Who could better tell us about the Nazi terror and the evolving persecution of the German Jewish community?
My name is Samuel. I was born and raised in Berlin, an eager student who loved school, especially music. At an early age, I fell in love with the violin. I majored in musicology at the Humboldt University of Berlin. Upon graduation, I became a concert violinist, serving in that capacity for many years. Later in life, when I was 50 years old, the Nuremberg Laws were enacted, systematically marginalizing and excluding Jewish citizens from society. My life drastically changed from one day to the next. Despite the circumstances, I learned as much as possible about what was really going on in the Third Reich. At the end of 1939, tens of thousands of Jews from Germany and Austria were deported to the city of Lublin in Poland, where we forced into the ghetto. I and my family were among them. In 1942, I, my wife, our 3 daughters, their husbands and 4 grandchildren were deported to the Majdanek concentration camp. All perished, and I alone have survived, each day wondering why. Yet in spite of the unimaginable horrors of the Nazi murder campaign, my spirit has somehow remained unbroken. I decided to recount my experiences, hoping to remind others, and the world, of the atrocities that occurred. There is of course much that I can share about our life in Germany before the war began. Indeed, all of us had a sense of what Nazi policy entailed from Hitler's rise in 1933 until the war broke out in 1939. But what did we, as average Germans, really know about the vicious inner workings of Nazi ideology? Of course, anti-Semitism in those days was widespread. We felt the sting of it every day. Propaganda was in the air. And with their great propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels spouting the party line continuously from every media outlet, not surprising that the bulk of the German people actually ascribed to it in one way or another. Nazi propaganda was designed for the masses, but what about the members of the German elite, the political class? Take Hjalmar Schacht, head of the Reichsbank and German Minister of Finance. If you asked him about us Jews, he would mouth all of the appropriate anti-Semitic slogans.
Der Jude muss erkennen, dass sein Einfluss für alle Zeiten verschwunden ist. Wir möchten, dass unser Volk und unsere Kultur rein und unverwechselbar bleiben, so wie es die Juden seit der Zeit des Propheten Esra immer von sich selbst gefordert haben.
But if you cornered him, if you pulled him aside, he would likely say something a bit different. Schacht looked at German society in those days and saw 2 destabilizing elements, the Hitler Youth and the notorious stormtroopers, the SA. Young hoodlums like that worried and terrified us with physical violence. I was even beaten up one day as I returned home from playing in a concert. But it was these young thugs who worried Schacht the most. Amazingly, he wanted to institutionalize anti-Semitism.
Die Lösung dieser Probleme muss jedoch unter staatlicher Führung erfolgen und darf nicht unregulierten Einzelhandlungen überlassen werden, die einen störenden Einfluss auf die Volkswirtschaft bedeuten.
If Schacht had any motto, it wouldn't be limited to Deutschland über alles, Germany overall, but something like Export über alles, export above all. We must export our products so that Germany can be strong again economically. Confidentially, he would tell you, anti-Semitism is bad for business. Will people abroad really want to buy our Volkswagens if they perceive us as vicious racists? We therefore need to restrain anti-Semitic policies. Things need to get normalized. We need to institutionalize the Nazi revolution.
Historians have pointed out that almost every revolution down through history is followed by a clash between 2 camps. Some want to institutionalize the revolution. Others want to radicalize it and keep it going. Institutionalization versus radicalization. The Nazi Revolution was a perfect case in point.
After Hitler rose to power in 1933, one of the early measures undertaken involved an anti-Jewish boycott, which terrified us all the more and certainly pleased the radicals. Imagine how we felt, being strong contributors to the German economy. Suddenly, there was a general boycott of Jewish shops, enterprises and professionals.
Der Boykott gegen die internationale Gräuelpropaganda ist in Berlin und im ganzen Reich mit voller Wucht ausgebrochen. Ich fahre die Tauentzienstraße entlang, um die Situation zu beobachten. Alle Geschäfte der Juden sind geschlossen. Vor ihren Eingängen sind SA-Männer postiert. Die Öffentlichkeit hat überall ihre Solidarität bekundet. Die Disziplin ist vorbildlich. Eine imposante Leistung. Alles geschieht in völliger Stille, auch im Reich.
I was coming home from rehearsal, violin in hand, and passed by uniformed Nazi pickets standing in front of Jewish shops. They attacked their clients and wrote anti-Semitic slogans on their windows. They even started chasing me, and I had to run to escape. I arrived home shaken, and my wife and 3 daughters. But the boycott was limited in scope, and that pleased the more moderate Nazis. Yet the official Nazi Party newspaper declared,
Ruhe, Disziplin und keine Gewalt. Die Aktionskomitees sind dafür verantwortlich, dass dieser gesamte Kampf in völliger Ruhe und mit absoluter Disziplin geführt wird. Schädige auch in Zukunft keinem Juden ein Haar. Wir werden der jüdischen Gräueltatenkampagne allein durch die einschneidende Wucht der aufgeführten Maßnahmen begegnen. Mehr denn je ist es jetzt notwendig, dass die gesamte Partei in blindem Gehorsam als ein Mann hinter der Führung steht.
In response, Robert Welch, the editor-in-chief of a respected Zionist newspaper in Berlin, which we all read, made an impassioned plea for inner fortitude and renewed Jewish pride. Wear it with pride, the yellow badge. That was the title.
The 1st of April 1933 will remain an important date in the history of German Jewry. Indeed, in the history of the entire Jewish people. It is for us to see how the Jews will react. April 1st, 1933 can become the day of Jewish awakening and Jewish rebirth. The Jew who denies his Judaism is no better a citizen than his fellow who avows it openly. Now even that is no longer an advantage. The Jew is marked as a Jew. He gets the yellow badge. A powerful symbol is to be found in the fact that the boycott leadership gave orders that a sign with a yellow badge on a black background was to be pasted on the boycotted shops. The patrols moved from house to house, stuck their placards on shops and signboards, daubed the windows, and for 24 hours the German Jews were exhibited in the stocks, so to speak. In addition to other signs and inscriptions, one often saw windows bearing a large Magen David, the shield of David the king. It was intended as dishonor. Jews, take it up, the shield of David, and wear it with pride.
Welch's essay basically amounted to an acknowledgement that these days represented the end of our long process of Jewish emancipation. From now on, we Jews would have to be content to live as a minority in a racist state. Was there any urgency here that we should perhaps think about leaving Germany? Of course not. Germany was our home, and in Germany we would remain. After all, the boycott lasted only a single day, so as not to alarm conservatives like Schacht. Welch's words are haunting, especially since there was no way we could have foreseen the radical direction the Nazi revolution would take. And of course, the radicals among the Nazis were more than happy to take the lead.
The extremists were Goebbels, Julius Streicher, publisher of the pornographic anti-Semitic weekly Der Stürmer, and others. These viewed the anti-Jewish boycott of April 1st, 1933, as an opportunity to rid the German economy of the Jews altogether. Pressure from the party rank and file and from the SA, especially to go beyond these legal restrictions, were resisted on several grounds. First, the conservatives were opposed, especially those like Hjalmar Schacht, the minister responsible for the restoration of the German economy. To them, any such action was likely to disrupt the economic recovery. Schacht and others like him opposed drastic anti-Jewish actions because Jews were considered an important middle-class element in Germany and a powerful force abroad.
In 1935, ominous signs appeared. The increasingly violent hate articles appearing in Julius Streicher's Der Stürmer were echoed in Joseph Goebbels' Der Angriff, the attack. The exclusion of US Jews from German life altogether was demanded. Hitler's response involved taking the route of least resistance, placate everybody. What followed were the Nuremberg Laws of 1935, a devastating series of anti-Jewish laws and regulations. We understand, first of all, that Germany had in fact been undergoing a revolution. Secondly, as I dug deeper, it became clear to me that the political elites were caught up in a conflict between institutionalizers and radicals. Hitler was simply trying to please both sides of his own political spectrum. One of the laws had to do with the so-called protection of German blood and honor. We Jewish men were not to contaminate German women.
Ehen zwischen Juden und Staatsangehörigen deutschen oder verwandten Blutes sind verboten. Außereheliche Beziehungen zwischen Juden und Staatsangehörigen deutschen oder verwandten Blutes sind verboten unter 45 Jahren.
These regulations were sure to please the radicals. But they also declared something that was a huge blow to us, as we considered ourselves an integral part of the German nation.
Das Zeigen der Reichs- und Nationalflagge sowie das Zeigen der Nationalfarben durch Juden ist verboten.
We Jews were no longer part of the German nation. We had been effectively excommunicated, but we were not stateless either.
Allerdings ist ihnen das Zurschaustellen der jüdischen Farben gestattet. Die Ausübung dieses Rechts steht unter dem Schutz des Staates.
That provision was designed to placate the more conservative faction, the institutionalized. Still, we Jews were effectively deprived of our German citizenship and also of political rights.
Reichsbürger ist nur derjenige Staatsangehörige, der deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes ist und durch sein Verhalten den Willen und die Eignung zeigt, dem deutschen Volk und dem Reich gläubig zu dienen. Der Reichsbürger ist der einzige Träger der vollen politischen Rechte gemäß den Bestimmungen der Gesetze.
In a speech before the Reichstag, Hitler outlined the ideological objectives of the Nuremberg Laws. Imagine how we felt when we heard his chilling words.
Dieses Gesetz ist ein Versuch, eine gesetzgeberische Lösung für das Judenproblem zu finden. Sollte dieser Versuch scheitern, wird es notwendig sein, das Problem zur endgültigen Lösung per Gesetz an die Nationalsozialistische Partei zu übertragen.
For the Nazis, of course, everything had to be done by law. In Hitler's mind, the anti-Jewish agitation elsewhere in Europe and across the centuries was useless because it was technically unlawful. The National Socialists would make murder, our murder, legal. Of course, Hitler the politician cleverly avoided explaining what his final solution would involve. He certainly knew in advance that this attempt, that is, the Nuremberg Laws, would fail. So the problem would be transferred to the Nazi Party, operating outside the normal legal framework. In the meantime, Hitler was content to give a crumb to the radicals and a crumb to the institutionalizers, basically sitting on the fence. There was one more looming question addressed by the Nuremberg Laws that affected each of us. Who is a Jew?
Ein Jude ist, wer von mindestens 3 Großeltern abstammt, die Volljuden sind. Ein Jude ist auch, wer von 2 volljüdischen Eltern abstammt, wenn a. er zum Zeitpunkt des Erlasses dieses Gesetzes der jüdischen Religionsgemeinschaft angehörte oder dieser später beitrat, b. er mit einer jüdischen Person verheiratet war, zum Zeitpunkt des Erlasses des Gesetzes oder eine spätere Heirat, c. er ist der Nachkomme einer Ehe mit einem Juden im Sinne von Abschnitt I, die nach Inkrafttreten des Gesetzes zum Schutz des deutschen Blutes und der deutschen Ehre geschlossen wurde. Wirksam, d. er ist das Kind einer außerehelichen Beziehung mit einem Juden gemäß Abschnitt I und wird nach dem 31. Juli 1936 unehelich geboren.
It's bureaucratic gobbledygook. We couldn't help but notice that the law designates as Jews people involved in the Jewish religious community. But wasn't Jewishness now to be defined as racial, not religious? How did we Jews define who is a Jew? It's pretty simple. Anyone who has a Jewish mother. But this law defines a Jew as anyone who is descended from 3 Jewish grandparents. What if there were only 2 Jewish grandparents? Such a person is a half-Jew, a Mischling, and Mischling was officially protected. In Hungary, many Jews flocked to churches to obtain baptismal certificates, hoping that this would protect them. Many were in for a rude awakening. Sometimes Mischling was deported anyway, at the whim of the bureaucrat. A person with 2 Jewish parents would clearly have at least 3 Jewish grandparents and be deported to the camps. A Jew who married a German, both of whose parents were German, would spawn offspring who were in the Mischling category. Such a person would go off to fight in Hitler's army. Yet the same person might easily have a Jewish mother and be considered Jewish under Jewish law. If this same Mischling were to marry a full-blooded Jew, the Jewish spouse would be protected by virtue of being married to a Mischling. By one estimate, as many as 150,000 soldiers, sailors and airmen of partial Jewish descent served in Adolf Hitler's forces. A cruel irony, In the end, Nazi policy turned out to be a Nazi mess. And that's the way it was. As for me, I have devoted my life to educating others about the genocide perpetrated by the Nazi Reich. I share the harrowing story in the hope that by exposing the brutalities of the past, we can work toward a more enlightened and peaceful future. May my words be a potent testament to human resilience and the enduring hope for a better world. That is the most I can ask.